Captain, enemy ships decloaking off our port bow.
They're charging weapons.
Shields up. Red alert.
They're firing!
Containment failure detected. Warp core breach imminent.
Welcome to Warp Core Breach, Episode 8. On this episode, Nick and David recap Wave 18. The faction report goes logical. Steven hunts down the Omega particle. Griffin shatters a mirror. Natasha is all about basic maneuvers. Nick's Intermix is on the hunt for super movement. And we all eat some gagh and share our top Klingon ships.
Warning. Warp core breach detected.
I'm David Montgomery, and here's my co-host, and Random Redshirt, the Geordie, and Barkley, to my Scotty.
I'm Nick Norris.
I'm Brendan Gibson.
And as you all may have heard, I am the new WizKids preview guy.
Yay!
My minions rejoice.
Mama!
So guys, I know you haven't played Year of Hell yet, but you probably have your builds ready to go. Are you at least excited for the tournament?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I just love the whole premise behind it. It's looking really exciting.
It's got a unique little storyline effect that actually can have an impact other than just a side mission that you can get some points for. It takes us back to some of the more effective OPs, like in the Collective, where there's more things you gotta actively consider.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had this really cool notion of kind of setting up on an angle and like riding in front of the wave as it's moving every round.
Mm-hmm.
And then making your opponent kind of come towards you in order to kill your ships. And
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how well it would work out, but it's something I think I'm going to try to just mess around with myself and see if I can pull it off, just as, you know, one of those maneuvering exercises. But I fear that it's something, if I pulled it off in round 1 and maybe even round 2, by the time I got to round 3, I'd be too tired to consistently pull it off. But the idea would be fun.
Mm-hmm. It just gave me an idea for not so much the Fed shuffle, but just reversing through it, so you can keep your firing arc more prevalent.
I think that the one thing I fear most about this mission is that it turns into a cloaked mind joust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even that's going to present some interesting options in terms of how quickly you engage, where you engage, and your angles of setup, and how you set up your build. Do you want maneuverability? Do you want high defense? Do you want high attack? So I like that it presents options, even though you're going to have a very small window of opportunity to make your passes.
Mm-hmm. It makes you consider more options than just your generic joust. It remains a strong possibility for a lot of players, but it encourages some more creative thought.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to hear more about that from you, Nick, next week. And you've been building it up for a few weeks, and I'm certainly going to be interested to hear how it plays out.
For our repeat listeners, our guest today, Brendan Gibson, is indeed the fellow I was speaking of the last 2 episodes, and he's definitely joining us tomorrow. So I hope you look forward to hearing what happens.
It'll probably be Brendan got smothered. Brendan got obliterated in the first 2 rounds and watched as the wave destroyed everything around him.
That's your devious ploy.
That's
and then you come back around and trounce him. Yeah.
You didn't see the cloaked bird of prey in the corner.
So, David, we know what's new for me in the Star Trek Attack Wing community. We've been leading up to it for a while. But what's new for you?
Well, some people may have heard what I'm going to be doing for the next 2 weeks in terms of previewing ships, but yeah, life's going to be very, very busy. Basically, as this podcast drops, the first of the blind boosters will be spoiled on the Shipyard YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed to that, head on over to YouTube and look for that, and I'm sure it will be all over the community and Board Game Geek, and basically everywhere you get your Star Trek Attack Wing news, somebody will probably be talking about it. So my plan is to do one of those a day for 10 days, probably interspersing Temporal Code War 1 prize ship in there at some point, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I may take one day off for a weekend because I feel like it, but, you know, my goal is to get ships out there for you guys to know what's coming.
Of course. We certainly appreciate all you've been doing to get to this point, and we've had a great representative in the community, Terry Latorco. She was handling the previews for a good while there, and she did a great job. So it's certainly big shoes to fill. I look forward to seeing your first release.
I'm excited and nervous at the same time, but that keeps me on my toes.
I'll bet.
Crew wave jitters.
Yeah.
Good evening, and welcome to the Faction Report, the segment that brings you the inside scoop on all the factions. We'll show you how they really work, expose their weaknesses, find innovative combinations, and help you make them work better. And now here's your host, the man who is not Picard, David Walton.
I've been thinking a lot about the other factions in the game lately. There are the big five, the three from the starter, plus Dominion and Borg, that tend to get quite a lot of attention in faction pure play. But there are other factions that often get overlooked, and today I thought I'd have a look at the Vulcan faction and seeing what they had to offer. Rather than go through them card by card, what I'm going to try and do is say, as a general rule, what do they have to offer? So, there are two types of Vulcan ship, the gagh and the Sirocc, and there are 4 named versions of those two ships. The thing that they have in common, or at least 2 of those versions have in common, is that they get a bonus for being able to fire at range 3. Both the named gagh and the Navarre have a bonus when they're firing their primary weapon at range 3. With certain upgrades, this will take their primary weapons up to 4, which is a pretty good level when you consider it's one of the minor factions. Staying at range 3 is quite difficult though. Thankfully, both of those different types of ships have the option of taking a reverse manoeuvre. Now, most of the time this would give you a auxiliary power token, and no one really wants to have an auxiliary power token. But another thing that the Vulcan faction has to its advantage is it has, perhaps out of all of the factions, the most ways of getting rid of an auxiliary power token. There are 2 tech upgrades that they have that do this. The first one is the auxiliary control room, which allows you to disable the card at any time to remove an auxiliary power token. And the second one, and I think the better one, is the power grid. Given the Worf ruling that said that if a card says at any time it needs to be done between phases, the power grid is actually a better upgrade. It's 1 point cheaper, and when you're supposed to place an auxiliary power token beside your ship, you can disable this card instead. That means that you can just reverse, disable your power grid, take an action, and maintain that range 3. Another thing that the Vulcans have is that they are actually quite survivable. I don't think that stacking defense dice is a really good way of surviving, unless you're stacking 6 or 7 with quality. But what the Vulcans have is the named ability on the blind buy ship, which was the Talkir, which was that you could take an auxiliary power token in order to add an evade result. Now, this is really good because the Vulcans are so good at getting rid of auxiliary power tokens. They're also survivable from the point of view that they've got quite high hull and shields. This is even better when you consider the combination of Captain Sopek, who is a captain that a lot of people are very fond of. He allows you as an action to choose one of the crew upgrades that was discarded from your ship in a previous turn and redeploy it to your ship. This is a great upgrade when used with Kov, who was the crew upgrade that came with the Talkir blind buy. Kov, as an action, you can discard to repair up to 2 damage to your hull and shields. This means that basically every other turn you can get 2 hull or shields back You're staying at range 3, where enemies' weapons are perhaps a little bit less effective. This gives you the opportunity to continually regen your hull and shields. And I quite like that. The other thing that the Vulcan faction has that is quite good at helping them to survive is the elite talent diplomacy. A lot of people have spoken about this as a card to be used in mixed faction play, and it's certainly a very good card to be used in mixed faction play. But for the Vulcans in particular, as an action, it allows you to basically choose one of your ships in the fleet that doesn't get shot at. So if you've got a ship that's relying on Cov to regenerate hull and shields, and you're down to the last 2 hull and shields, and you're terrified that you'll die in the next volley, use diplomacy. Sopek has an elite talent slot, so it fits on the ship, and then you can make sure that you stay alive. Now, I'm not saying that Vulcans are the best fleet in the game. I'm not saying they're at the same level as the Big Five, but I think there are certain tricks they have, and a certain play style that you can generate with them that make them a really fun faction to play. They have quite a lot of power of attrition. They can be quite annoying if they stay at range 3, and they're going to be able to deal with quite a lot of the effects that hand out auxiliary power tokens. So, have a go with the Vulcans. See what you can do, and if you fancy letting me know, my blog is notpicard.blogspot.com. And it's been great talking to you again. I'm Not Picard.
Hello again, everybody. This is Stephen Van Deventer from Da Vinci's DreamWorks 2. And back again after all the storms. I'll talk to you about some more multiplayer fun time that we like to do at our store. So one of the missions we did recently was called Search for the Omega Particle. Omega Particle is a perfect particle that the Borg were after in Star Trek Voyager, and I think it was the theme for several video games like Star Trek Armada and Star Trek Armada 2. So, for our event, we had it set to 100 points. Each player could have 2 ships, no more, no less. Obviously, you could not have 2 fighters or 2 shuttles, but you could have 1 per the normal restriction. There was no point restriction on the ships, and 10 points of your build can be used for resources. So you could have more than 1, but you couldn't have duplicates, and you could use retired resources if you wanted. The map was set up with about 8 or 9 planets, and we had 2 wormhole tokens off to the sides. We basically put 2 maps together, so it was a 6x3 playing area. What would happen is if a ship was destroyed, it would return at the start of the next playing phase near one of the wormhole tokens. You could choose. And it's a multiplayer event. I think for our event, we ended up having 8 people for it. The goal was players had to search the Delta Quadrant, which is where you were, for the Omega Particle, which is hidden on one of the planets. To do so, players had to send away teams down. You had to be within range 1 of the planet. You could perform the following action. If you're not cloaked, you can disable all your shields, place an away team on a captain, admiral, or crew, which must include either one captain, admiral, or crew, and may include any number of the listed on your ship as you wish. You may give a free action and roll an attack dice for each member on your away team. If you score at least 2 hits or 1 crit, you may search the planet. And I had on the planets, which if you saw on the pictures, I had several decks of cards spread out on the planets, and what I had on them was these cool little events that would happen. Of course, the Omega Particle was one of them, but I had a bunch of just cool stuff. You could find nothing and be like, oh man, you could end up with a triple token placed on your ship. You could get Borg attack, and all your crew is discarded. Lost communication, you switch this card with any random card on any planet, which was pretty neat. New energy source, you get to restore all your destroyed shields. You could play this at any time. When you had the card, it's just on your ship. Hunted, roll 1 attack dice. On a crit, discard your captain. On a hit, discard 1 of your crew. Refit, you can deploy 1 tech from outside the game to your ship, even if it exceeds your ship's restrictions. Dead Redshirt, discard 1 of your crew. Promoted, you may deploy a captain or admiral to your ship if it doesn't have 1 from outside the game. Lost crew, you basically deploy a previously discarded crew that was discarded during the game. And Trek No Babel Storm, disable your captain. Now, to bring your away team back up, you have to have your away team before you can try to leave. You can do an action if you're within range 1 of the planet, and you're not cloaked, disable all your shields. Remove your away team tokens from your captain, admiral, and crew. While you have away team tokens on those cards, they cannot use their abilities or any elite talents assigned to them. The goal was to get the Omega Particle and try to escape outside of one of the wormholes. If your ship was destroyed and was carrying the Omega Particle, the ship destroying you, if it was within range 1, you can actually disable all your shields as an action on the previous turn to grab the Omega Particle and put on your ship. We gave the person who got the Omega Particle and left an LE, the player who destroyed the most ships in LE, and we gave Redshirt an LE, as always. We did have a bonus, though, because we usually play with like a cool thematic bonus. Ships from the Delta Quadrant, as seen from Star Trek Voyager, are allowed to field an additional 10 points per Delta Quadrant ship, so a max of plus 20, assuming you brought 2 Delta Quadrant ships. But only if you assign captains from Star Trek Voyager as well. Captain Janeway, Kazon, Species, Borg. You don't have to be thematic and have to have Janeway and Voyager. You can put Janeway on a Species ship if you want to get the bonus. But most of our players played pretty thematically. In the pictures from the event, we had a lot of Voyagers out there, and it was pretty crazy. I think the coolest themed one that we saw was there was a Kazon player. She ended up winning, actually. She had a Kazon Predator class, the Relora Sankor, and her other ship was Voyager, but it was the Kazon stolen Voyager. So it had a Kazon captain, all Kazon crew on board. Because in one of the episodes, the Kazon did manage to actually hijack Voyager and run off with it. So it was very cool to see that themed. I think another player had a Borgified Voyager, where they had teamed up to fight against Species. There was a couple of Species ships out there. There were a few people who were like, I don't want to do Delta Quadrant theme. I'm just going to play Romulans or Klingons. So there was a bunch of that as well. But it was very fun. The Borg player, he got the most kills. He had a tactical cube, and he kept picking off this one player's shuttle. She didn't dock it, so it kept getting killed, and it would spawn out of the wormhole, and he was just right there and be like, I'm going to shoot it, and kept getting points. And our red shirt was for the player who had the Borgified Voyager, because it was really cool, and he was just going around causing all kinds of shenanigans, and he seemed to get every bad card imaginable. His captain got killed by the Borg. He kept getting his crew killed. Every card he found was just terrible. So that was pretty funny. And I'll talk to you guys next week about some more multiplayer.
So now that we've seen all of the previews for Wave 18, we wanted to take a little bit of time to give our thoughts on what the Wave has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nick, overall impressions, what do you think?
Well, the Bioship Beta was the first one that was released. It's something many of us have been long looking forward to. It's a good ship. I'm definitely going to be pulling that guy out from the near future. Its ability, when defending during the compare result step, you cancel one hit result at the cost of an Ox power token. Like, there's a lot of that sort of thing starting to slowly come into the game, and I like having a little bit extra damage mitigation. It gives you a little bit more of a back and forth play with the game instead of just whump, you're dead, right? So that's something that I'm definitely looking forward to make use of. The next release was the Quark's Treasure, which to me is going to blow things wide open for possibilities. And I think that's one that definitely warrants conversation.
Yeah, Quark's Treasure is certainly a game changer.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note something we were discussing privately earlier is like Quark's Treasure's ability, you do not pay a faction penalty when assigning any crew or tech upgrades to this ship. This could potentially break penalty pure environments. Like, I know it's not an official format, but the possibility of it either being banned altogether or really shaking things up. So this is going to be some interesting times ahead based on things like that.
Yeah, I think it's something, if you're in a penalty pure venue, you're definitely going to want to talk to your TO, talk to your play group about it, figure it out before you do anything rash, because the best thing you can ever do is communicate.
Yes, you got, like, TOs especially, those of you listening here, your number one priority is to your players. Without them, you have nothing. So talk to your players, listen to what they have to say, and come to a decision as a group, because otherwise there's no point of even showing up. You want to come there, you want to have fun, enjoy the game. That's the bottom line for people coming down. So work it out, talk.
And of course, the third ship we saw was the USS Phoenix, and Retail Nebula is something that a lot of people have been longing for.
Yeah, and one of the things on top of that is people's expectations were fulfilled when we got a high energy sensor sweep now at retail.
Yeah, I think that card was a good bit of fan service. I was excited to see it, and I was excited that that was the card and not everything from the prize pack.
Right, it wasn't just a repack, redressing like the Tholio one.
Exactly. I could have liked seeing secondary torpedo launchers. That could have been
that
a
was
thing.
the other one. Yeah.
But I'll take one of the two, and given the option of only having one, I think I would rather have high energy sensor sweep.
Agreed. Hands down agreement there. The other big one with this is the aft torpedo launcher. 360 torpedoes, people, but they're limited to photon torpedoes, so it doesn't apply to quantums or chronotons or plasma. So, if anything, I want to take this opportunity to encourage WizKids. They may have already considered this and may be doing it, but have a faction-based one for each. So Romulans need to get the plasma torpedo version. I'd like to see both plasma and photon torpedo variants for Independent at some point.
Well,
and
it would definitely build on the actual factions too. I mean, it'd give them that independence that they need, rather than just having the generic photon torpedoes, which everybody has.
Oh, for sure. But one of the things that I don't want to see is too much Federation favoritism for abilities and cards that are not, in concept, linked exclusively to the Federation in canon. Like, for example, the Federation doesn't have the monopoly on torpedoes firing at different angles. There are other races fully capable of doing this. Case in point, you've got the Maquis Raider Gavroche, which came with only a forward arc. The Valjean, the retail version, came with a forward and a rear arc. That's one of the few times we saw something drastic changing between class. But canonically, it was mentioned that B'Elanna Torres installed a rear torpedo launcher. So it was not stock, but unique to that ship.
That's a very good point. And a card like this is something I hope we see more of. And I think that it isn't game-changing where it is because it really only works on, I believe it's 3 classes of ships right now. I think it's Nebula, Constitution, and Akira are the only ones that only have a forward arc and no rear arc and meet the hull requirement.
Right. It's not like you can throw it on the Prometheus or the Enterprise E to get side firing because it has the rear arc.
Right. But those are 3 classes of ships that can legitimately take photon torpedoes and do some good work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like this card is dead on arrival. And I think a card like this coming over to Romulans would be very interesting.
Oh, definitely. But just getting back to the Federation side of this, I think one of the classes that would do well with this is the Stargazer Constellation class, especially given that we've got a Hathaway coming up. It's a 3-1-4-3 with a forward 180, tacking on an essential 360 torpedo radius with that. So there's some potential there.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The Constellation class is another one that this works on. So
beefs it up a bit more.
Yeah, I think that it could work well. So something like this, there are good options out there. I think that WizKids is definitely making a push to try to make torpedoes playable.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they're ever going to truly succeed in that, I don't know that it matters from a high-level competitive play.
Yeah.
I think right now, there are enough neat, cool tricks out there that you can play it at a local level, at a random organized play event, and have fun with it, right?
Okay.
To borrow the X-Wing phrase, torpedoes can now be part of the fly casual meta.
Indeed.
And to me, that's really cool, right? I am glad that we've gotten to a point where it's something that you can take to say, you know what? challenge accepted that you can't make this work. I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, and that's something that I definitely appreciate from WizKids, is like, they're not taking things lying down, they're not aggressively confronting the fans or anything, they're just saying, okay, you have your concerns, you have this, you have that, you've made your points, now let's see what we can do with this to meet somewhere in the middle. The Arsenal card is further evolution, or progression, I should say, with the whole time token. Sure, it adds 2 secondary weapon upgrade slots to your bar, but it also plays on the time token mechanic. When placing time tokens on one of your other weapon upgrades, you can place one of those tokens on this card. So you can essentially split it up. So instead of counting down one at a time on one card, you can also put a time token on this card so that they both count off one at the end of that round. So it speeds it up quite nicely. And with rapid reload, it's going to stack rather well. One question I would have, and I'm not sure if anyone submitted it to Wharf yet, but when a time token is on a card, does the text apply in any fashion?
That is something I have no idea about.
Right, like with a disable, the text no longer is in effect. But with a time token, can you still use it to place a time token from another weapons card? Like if you were permitted to fire 2 secondary weapons in one turn, both of them having time tokens, could you then place a second time token on Arsenal by using its ability?
Well, I think that's a great question to try to find out. I will do my best to inquire.
Please do. Thanks, David. It's great to have you as a middleman resource. I appreciate your efforts.
Hey, always happy to help out where I can.
For the love of the game, brother.
Indeed. So, for me, the real winner in this pack is, of course, Quark's Treasure. And that is just because of the lovely shenanigans you can pull with it.
Oh, yeah.
But I also like some of the upgrades, and again, not going to go into tons and tons of details. We've got a blog for that. But, just the options that you have, better fleshing out the Ferengi, giving them more options as a faction, is a really nice thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that putting them in a position where they've got 4 ships, now a second class of ships, just makes them a little more intimidating.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned second class of ships. Now, in the canon of the Ferengi, they use the same space frame for their ships, but, have completely different internal configurations. Now, granted, the models will all look alike, but it would be nice to have different variations, like the battleship version, the transport cargo version, and so on. It would allow them to jumble up the slots a little bit, give them different stats, and mix things up within the Ferengi meta.
That is a very good point. I know that they've mixed up the slots on the 3 named Decoras in the past. Right, I think we've seen each of them have a 2 tech, a 2 weapon, and a 2 crew. So they've at least played around with that a little bit, but nothing in changing up the stats.
Right. But the stats is something that I think is really important to embrace if we're not going to have a great broad variety of ships. Now, with the transports, even just stepping back to the slots thing, you'd probably have more tech and crew and potentially no secondary weapons and a weaker primary.
Yeah. Give us a cargo that's got a whole bunch of room for crew and tech.
And what would be interesting is if they came up with a secondary mechanic that maybe would involve cargo transport, something that you can acquire latinum, and in OPs you can actually use that for fleet points. And in casual games it could give you other benefits.
Maybe allow you to purchase upgrades after the fact or something.
Or you could have a special sideboard for Ferengi that as you earn latinum in the course of the game, you could then use it to purchase set cards. Not something you can just pull from anywhere, but something that you lay out beforehand.
kind of like a Latinum deck.
Yeah.
More negotiation abilities.
That could be very interesting. I think the best thing I want to do, I want to come back to that, but I think that's a topic for another episode.
Yeah, agreed.
So, the bioship beta, nothing to sneeze at either. Perhaps not the ship in terms of upgrades that everyone wanted, but I think there's a couple of gems here for bioship players. You know, there are some expensive cards, and because of that, you're not going to be taking tons and tons of stuff.
Right.
But if you want 1 extra card, 2 extra cards, just to kind of make a fleet work, I think there's some things in here that hit some key aspects. More so, I think the cards here are tailored to mission play, or maybe some upcoming OP events that may just work out in the bioship favor.
Right.
Keep your eyes out for that. Keep considering them. WizKids seems to be on a roll with designing cards that may not be evident why they're in the game right now, but there's a purpose for them down the road.
Think of the evolution of television, where it was episodes of old would always go from A to B, each episode. It'd start somewhere, end somewhere, and then the next episode would likely have nothing to do with what came before. And then the advent of story arcs, where from one episode to the next, you might have different missions, different general goings on, but there'd be threads connecting them all together. And we've already seen hints of that with what WizKids has done in the last little while. So I definitely expect to see more of that. So everyone keep your eyes and ears open, because there would be some pretty cool things coming.
So, of course, now the big question is, what are you buying from Wave 18?
Well, as a collector, I'm definitely buying 1 of each for sure. And there's a strong possibility that I will buy at least 2 USS Phoenix. I've already got 2 original Bioship Alpha, so I may only buy 1 of the beta. But after playing around with it a while, I may decide to get another. But I want to get some table time on it before I make a hard decision.
Well, I'm a big Federation guy myself, so I'm definitely picking up a Phoenix. And I don't mind playing around with Bioship Alpha, because I know a lot of people that like to play Borg, and when you always have that upper hand, it's best to have what's new. So, probably pick up the beta too.
Mm-hmm. It's a durable powerhouse.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it has a lot to offer too.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. For me, it's 1 of everything and a second bioship. Probably not right away, but biological technology is one of those cards that I want to have to be able to put on multiple species bioships.
Yes.
And remember, I'm the guy that's bringing a collection for 2 players, and Natasha loves her bioships. So if I'm ever in a position where I want to run a bioship, I got to have the stuff to take it to, because she gets the first pick on the bioship stuff.
So, poor David might have to own 4 bioship betas in the end.
Oh, shucks.
Darn.
No, just 4 total bioships, and 2 of them with biotech. And
yes, but what if she decides she wants to use both of them? Then you're on the fence.
then I'll probably buy a 5th.
That works.
I know, it sucks to have a girlfriend who plays this game.
Hey, watch it, buddy. Count yourself lucky.
I know, that was sarcasm, folks. That was sarcasm.
I'm sure if Natasha here, she would take it well, but she'd still give it back.
Oh, she'd probably punch me in the arm. But on that note, I'm going to throw it over to Griffin for a mission before this gets any worse and I get myself any more in trouble.
Good man.
Hi, this is Dave Griffin. Today we're talking about the mission Shattered Mirror. This came with the Regent's flagship, the Mirror Negvar, although it could have come with the Mirror Defiant since it calls for both in the mission. And it reenacts the DS9 episode Shattered Mirror. The forces are Alliance versus Rebel. Basically, you're talking about a mirror faction versus mirror faction with friends. On the Alliance side, it's 90 points, 1 mirror Negvar, plus 2 ships with a hull value of 3 or less. On the Rebel side, it's 70 points, 1 mirror Defiant, plus 2 ships with a hull of 3 or less. And in both cases, you're not allowed to actually have ships with cloaking devices. So what do you do if you pick a ship with a cloaking device? Well, that ship costs 5 less squadron points. So the special rules are the setup first. The Alliance sets up in a 4x4 inch square in the center of the board, and the Rebels set up anywhere else they like as long as they're at least 4 inches from the edge. And the Rebels have something called a warp shadow. They found a weakness in the Alliance sensor system, and as a result, they're allowed to do a free sensor echo if they go speed 2 or greater. So the objectives of the Alliance: kill all the Rebel ships. On the Rebel side, kill the Negvar. And I'm sure you can see the potential weakness of the Alliance. All they have to do is lose the Negvar and they lose the match. So if the Rebel side concentrate on the Negvar, they have a good chance of winning the scenario. So the Negvar player has to go into it with a build designed to keep the Negvar alive. Otherwise, it's pretty much a straight-up fight. There's no terrain other than the initial setup. The Rebels have more control over that setup, and as a result, they're going to be able to pick the initial range. But they may or may not be able to pick the initial facing. If the Negvar does not have a higher captain skill than the Defiant side, then the Defiant side is going to be able to put ships on its tail. And this Negvar is even worse than the Prime Universe Negvar. It's giant and it moves like a oil tanker. So it would pay to have either a higher pilot skill so you can at least face the ship toward the enemy, or some kind of movement advantage. Because remember, the Rebels are going to have a built-in movement advantage with their warp shadow sensor echoes. The ships, remember, are all lightly loaded, because 90 points on the Alliance side and 70 points on the Rebel side with 3 ships each, there just isn't enough points for a lot of upgrades. It probably means captain skill is going to be low on both sides too, and maybe even some ships won't have captains. An interesting ship for a 3 hull is the NX class, either the Mirror Universe version or the Federation version. The Enterprise or the Avenger are both difficult to destroy if you have enhanced hull plating. You can destroy them, but it takes a lot of effort, as opposed to the obvious consorts of the Alliance ship, a couple of Klingon birds of prey. The problem with them is without their cloaks, they're extremely fragile. They have very little hull, and they have very little defense without the cloak. And they don't have the upgrades to be able to bring that defense up without the cloaks. So have a good time with this scenario. I would say that it's moderately well balanced depending on the builds of both sides. If I had to pick, I'd say the Defiant side has a slight advantage. I think it's about 3 stars out of 4. Definitely worth playing, especially if you want to see that gigantic Negvar and the Defiant on the board.
And here's Natasha with Dude, It's Just a Game. A perspective on Star Trek Attack Wing from someone who isn't completely obsessed.
Hey everyone, it's Natasha. Thanks for tuning in. David, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today is all about movement. So, movement takes a variety of paths, and there's a lot of different avenues to look at when it comes to getting the best bang for your buck when it comes to maneuvering. So, what do you want to talk about first about maneuvering?
Well, I think I'm going to call this segment Rookie Mistakes in Maneuvering. Because there's a lot of them. One of the first things I learned about maneuvering is that it has to be something you take into account when you are actually building your fleet. So the ships that you choose, you can't just look at their attack dice or how much defense they have. You also have to look at if they can maneuver well enough in the scenario to live long enough for their purpose.
Right, and it's more than just ships. It's also maybe taking some upgrades to make unmaneuverable ships work even better. The Independent Federation Fleet Captain, Admiral Forrest, upgrades like Travis Mayweather, ion thrusters,
Picard maneuver.
Right, all those things that can give you extra maneuvers or change your maneuvers and just basically make your ship a little more unpredictable, a little harder to get lined up in the sights.
Those are some of the things I look at when it comes to maneuvering. Is the ship going to be able to maneuver in the scenario set out? There was an OP where you could only maneuver on half the board. So some ships that need really wide turns, or every hard turn is red, and didn't have a come about, those weren't necessarily good ships for that. Another thing I look at when I'm talking about maneuvering is where I set up my ships. Because this is something I learned the hard way over many, many, many OP events, is that where you start your ship and the angle you start your ship on matters.
Right, it's not always best to just line them up at the front of range 1 of the setup and straight on. Sometimes you want a slight angle, sometimes you want to be all the way back or somewhat in the middle. Like, there are some really interesting setups that the more you play around with them, the trickier things you can do, and that gives you a lot of flexibility.
Right, and setup helps with ships that aren't maneuverable. For example, in the last OP, the Q3, I took 2 ships that did not have come-abouts. So I had to set them up in a way that I could angle them to be able to use their turns to turn around the objective token, because you kind of wanted to be near the objective token, mostly, in order to complete the mission. And the same thing with OP2. You wanted to be near the objective token. So the ships I took that weren't maneuverable, I needed, so I just used my starting setup to put me in a good place for that game.
Right, it's important. Sometimes you want a ship to come in on the outside as a flanker, and then they're able to utilize the banks rather than all of the hard turns and the come-abouts. There's so many different things you can do in setup, and if you're really wanting to get into that and you know a little bit about military history, there's a lot you can learn, even from just looking at some diagrams. You don't have to read a lot of stuff. And just see what famous war generals have done, because it does work out.
Okay, dude, it's just a game. No, I'm not going to look at famous wars. However, I might look at previous tournaments. I do think one of the main things that I had to learn about maneuvering that's still kind of hard for me is to not be so afraid of the Ox token. I think it's kind of communicated as a negative thing. It affects your fleet, and so some people will do anything to avoid getting or keeping an Ox token, which there's a balance. You don't want a bunch of Ox tokens, and they do stop your action. But I think if a red maneuver is going to get you either out of a situation or into the range you want to be, or a red maneuver gets you the least damage, then that's what you need to do. Particularly when it comes to come-abouts. Come-abouts are almost always red, but they put you in such an amazing position that it's worth the loss of an action.
The other thing, once you have auxiliary power, is you don't always have to clear it.
Right.
That is one of the biggest things that I've seen, is everybody goes, oh, I've got auxiliary power, I have to get rid of it. Well, yeah, if you're building a heavy action combo ship, then yes, you do. Because without actions, that ship's going down. But sometimes taking a green maneuver makes you very, very predictable. And if you pull a white maneuver, you're going to surprise your opponent, and then they have no idea where you are. They took a maneuver thinking that they knew exactly where you'd be, and now you've got the advantage on them, and that can mess with them and give you the advantage right back.
Right, so basically, Ox tokens aren't the best thing ever, but they won't completely kill your game if you play them right. You just have to know the power of an Ox token, and the power of really cool maneuvers. I will say, I don't know, probably everyone knows this, but just in case. If you've already got an Ox token, you can't take another red maneuver, and I learned this the hard way not once, but twice, which much to your delight.
Yeah, I didn't fly you off the board. I thought about it. I just flew you straight into my line of fire.
It happens. I actually did that another time more recently, and my opponent just flew me in the opposite direction I was trying to go, and so since I didn't have a come about on that ship, I'm basically just flying off into the corner for no reason at all. Kind of ruined my game with that ship.
So what you're saying is somebody put baby in the corner?
Someone did put baby in the corner. Nobody should put baby in the corner. But yeah, so, I mean, it's a rule, and it seems obvious, but it is easy to forget about when you're getting in there and trying to cause havoc. Is watch how many you have.
So yeah, maneuvers, you gotta be careful. Don't be afraid of the Ox. Don't always think that you have to take a grain to clear it.
Well, and I think there is something to be said about watching your, not just your setup, but your starting maneuvers. I know we already moved past this, but we'll go back. I think my tendency is to be really timid at first and just do like 1 or 2 straights and just kind of gauge how it goes. But there have been OPs and missions where that has strongly worked against me. So, I mean, you don't want to Picard maneuver on your first move every time and be all the way out in, Deep Space Nine somewhere or anything. But you also want to make sure you get in there and engage. Don't be scared. You're there to fight.
Right. I think it's all about balance and gauging what your opponent has. Sometimes you need to rush them, especially if they have a lot of cloaked minds. You limit their opportunity.
Yeah, about that.
Other times you want to lay back and let them come to you. It really is a lot of balance, and you got to know how to play both ways. And I think it's important for people to adapt and know what's out there when it comes to maneuver choices.
And I think sometimes that needs to be more ship-specific than we tend to make it. We tend to move all of our ships, everyone's moving 3 straight at first. But I've had a few times where it's been successful for me to have a ship or 2 hang out in the back, fighters specifically. I'll get them moved up toward, like, the middle area, and then I let people come to the fighters, and then they, blow them up a lot. So, it works out.
Yeah.
I get them to range 3, and they target lock, and then I move in for the kill next time. That next target lock. So,
it all can work out.
Anyway, so maneuvering is extremely important. You have to know your fleet. You have to know your opponent and their fleet. And you have to sometimes do the hard thing to get where you want to be. But it is such a crucial element of this game. I'm still learning, and I know others are probably still learning too. So hope this helps a little. Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you next time on Dude, It's Just a Game.
Welcome to the next edition of Nick's Intermix, where we look at card interactions to see which ones fizzle, which ones sizzle, which ones are stable, and which ones are volatile. In the chamber this week, we're going to see how to make a ship that can move 5 times in 1 turn. This is Nick's Intermix. Like any good build, we're going to start with the ship. In this case, let's go for the Alpha Hunter. It's an independent ship. 26 points gives you 4, 2, 3, 4, a forward 90-degree arc, excellent maneuverability, with a maximum speed of 4, white hard turns, and a red come-about maneuver. Its ability: after you move, you may perform a sensor echo action with the 1 straight maneuver as a free action, even if you are cloaked. Right away, that's 2 moves per turn. Next, we can add Captain Maxwell Forrest. And how do we get him on the Independent nicely without penalty? We'll throw on the Independent Fleet Captain Federation. This now gives us the potential for 4 maneuvers. We've got the initial move, 2 after you move maneuvers, both the movement from the Independent Fleet Captain Federation and the sensor echo that comes with the ship, as well as Maxwell Forrest's move. Now we can keep the action economy down to 0 for the occasional turn by adding William T. Riker, or as I call him, William E. Riker, because he's from the USS Enterprise E. You disable him to trigger Maxwell Forrest's ability for free. Now we could spend that action that we still have available on the Klingon talent in Cha from the Negvar. This one allows you to spend an action, discard the card to perform one additional maneuver of your choice that round. Now I know I said we could build a ship that does 5 moves in 1 turn, but let's add one more. Let's put Tuvok from the Valjean. He disables to allow you to get an additional 1 maneuver after an attack. That's a straight make or turn. Wow! And all that comes to you at the low price of 49 squadron points, which is perfect for those suggested builds. Not restricted by the 50 point per ship limit? Want to add a little bit more creativity to it? Well, we've got 2 more cards we can throw in. The Bajoran Tech Maneuverability, which allows you to change your come-about maneuver into a full-about maneuver. Granted, this card does cost 11 SP to place on a non-interceptor vessel, but if you got the points to spare, it's a nice option. And if you want another alternative to do something different from your initial maneuver, you could throw on Transwarp Drive. During the activation phase, if your maneuver dial reveals a straight 4 or straight 5 maneuver, you may instead use a straight 6. Now, the Alpha Hunter only has up to a straight 4, which is just fine. But hey, now you can move up to 6, and it doesn't cost you an action or a disable. Very nice. All this for only 64 squadron points. Not bad. All that still leaves 2 weapon slots free, but I'll let you decide what to put there. If you don't mind spending an action to trigger Forrest, and you don't need it for one of those other abilities, you can always bump him up to the Admiral slot. You'd have to pay a little bit extra for that penalty, but you could also choose another captain. After all, he is only a 4 captain skill captain. You could always bump it up by 1 and add Calvin Hudson, who's a captain skill 5, but oh wait, Admiral Forrest adds an additional 1, so now he's a captain skill 6 with Cal. And he adds either 1 tech, weapon, or crew slot to your upgrade bar of your choice. And on top of that, gives you a discount of 1 SP for all upgrades on your ship, because this is an independent ship. And that counters the extra cost of bumping Maxwell Forrest to Admiral. And after penalties and discounts square off, it only ended up costing you 1 squadron point more. Bonus. As usual, this isn't all you can do with this build. There's even more options, but I'm going to leave that for you to discover. That said, we've still only barely begun to cover the different options and possibilities within the realm of movement in Star Trek Attack Wing. Tune in next week for part 3 of our coverage of maneuvers. This has been Nick's Intermix.
And now it's time for the Warp Core Breach Top 3. We count them up from 3 to 1, and then we throw it over to our contributors so that you get the best bang for your buck. This week's top 3 is the top Klingon ship. It can be a named or a generic.
My third choice for the Klingon ships is the Negvar. 30 points, it's a powerful beast, and has an interesting ability of being able to lower shields to a point. So if you've already done a little bit of damage and you only have to take down a couple more, then you can spend your action on the following turn, knock down potentially up to 3 shields, and as an added bonus, you get to throw Klingon Boarding Party as a free action. And between the Klingon Boarding Party and the Klingon Stealth Party, I've had some interesting play.
Yeah, I like it. Named Negvar was not on my short list. Generic was, but I can definitely see why the name Negvar is appreciated.
I don't mind paying 2 points for an extra shield, unless my build screams, oh, I'm too shy of getting another upgrade in that I need desperately.
Right, that's generally what happens to me.
And the other benefit of the Negvar named is it goes from 8 to 9 durability, and it's not unheard of for powerful ships to be able to whip through 8 damage. It's less common for those ships to be able to get 9 damage through.
That is very true.
And in smaller swarm ships, where if you're able to get some decent defense going, assuming of course the Negvar is cloaked and you're rolling 5 dice, you might only get a couple through each time. The average is about 2.5 damage, I found. So if you take 3 ships shooting at this one for an average of 2.5, that can be rounded up roughly to about 8 damage in the end, and you're toast. But unless it goes fully rounded up, you're not likely to suffer 9 damage from just regular ping attacks. You got to be taking some serious hits. So 9 for me really pushes the envelope to the point where you've got that survivability, and that's critically important.
Very good points.
I got the Vorcha. I mean, it comes with the basic kit, but it's a very generic tool, and you can use it at any level. And with any, it has the 2 crews, so it allows you to be more adaptable with the ship and other ships.
Especially if you want to do something like Nagarin or Drex, in addition to like an Alexander.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. What's your number 3, David?
Well, that would be the IKS Karaga. This is Worf's ship, 26 points, 4 attack dice, 1 agility. Realistically, it might as well say 6, though, because the named ability, each time you defend while cloaked, roll 1 extra defense die, so you get the bonus 4 for being cloaked, and 1 more on top of that. So, you're sacrificing 3 shields, but you're getting an extra defense die. Yes, defense dice are tricky, but toss on Alexander to get that battle station every time you take damage, or toss on Ducat or Picard 9 cross-faction so that you have battle station for defense, some interface generators. You've got means of making this ship durable, and 5-hole basically puts you out of the one-shot range, especially at 6 defense dice, unless you completely whiff, which is totally possible. Just ask my defense dice.
Mm-hmm. And it's especially useful in those situations where you might come across magnetometric guided charges. And if you're playing mixed, let's not forget the ever wonderful Glindaro.
Yes, all of those things will help you out.
And the Korga is actually my number 2 pick.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yeah,
much for the same reasons.
Got the Korga as my second too. It's very durable, and it just gives you more options, especially having Worf as your captain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I've frequently played some tight Klingon builds where the Cavort class ships are at my front lines, and the Korga is one of them. So we've only have 2 to choose from. So unless you're going generic, it puts your staples right to the top. As my number 2 was your number 3, we pretty much got the Korga covered. What's your number 2, David?
Well, my number 2 is the Bemoth.
Ah.
I know this probably doesn't win the hearts and minds of people, but the named ability to perform a red maneuver while you have an auxiliary power token is really something unique.
Mm-hmm.
The Bemoth dial has 3 red maneuvers, the 3 hard turns, and the 3 come about. So this is a ship that can come about and then come about again, or turn and turn. Yeah, you're probably not getting any actions for a couple of rounds, but you're in a position where you're going to have a firing advantage whenever you want it.
Yeah, like the downside is you can't perform the maneuver without taking another one, so you're effectively getting a second token, but you're not limited in your movement just because of last turn's choice.
Exactly. So
it's a secondary impulse reactor built in.
It really is. And is it amazing? No, but it's a really cool ability. The Katinga is a nice platform that's built in. 4143 as a stat line is really nice. The ability to cloak. And something about the Bemoth just screams unique. It's different. And when stuff is unique and different, I like to reward it and celebrate what it has to offer. So that's why the Bemoth is my second favorite Klingon ship.
Good choice, David. And being from a blind booster during the collective, when people pulled that often turned the tide. Like, that was a very powerful booster to get. It really made a difference in a lot of games. And in a game like this, where half the combat effectiveness is your maneuvers, giving yourself more options than you would otherwise have is essential. And it can make the difference between victory and defeat.
You are absolutely correct. So, Nick, what is your number one pick?
My number one pick is the IKS Pach. I love the Cavorts because they're a great mid-level ship with strong attack power, strong durability, and come on, that ability. When attacking, you can convert one of your crit results into a hit, and then if you do that, you can then convert a blank into a hit. Yeah, you might lose that effectiveness of the crit damage, but you're probably going to use this ability when you're impacting on shields anyway. But converting that blank into a hit gives you an additional damage you wouldn't otherwise have had. So, would you rather the crit hit the last shield? Or would you want that to just be a normal hit anyway, take out the shield, and then get one hit to the hull? Or, if you got the ship down to the wire and you otherwise would leave him with one, this extra hit takes them out. I always love anything in these games that gives me a choice in the heat of the moment so that I can change out my maneuver based on what's happened or based on what's going on with the other guy's ship in the combat abilities and all that. I can say, oh, I need one extra damage, so I'm going to take that. So you've got options, and there's nothing wrong with having options because it just gives you more range, more effectiveness in the field. And if you're good at making decisions, you're going to be that much closer to victory. So, Brendan, what's your number one pick?
My number one is the Coronar. I like it because it's a Burrell class vessel. I like the smaller Klingon vessels that you can use in groups and whatnot. The other reason is, while you're cloaked, at range 1, you can use your primary and gain 1 attack die. If you're properly stacked with the proper captain, proper crew members, and vital tech and weaponry, you can increase the attack die, obviously, to a proportional amount. And using the small Burrell class ships gives you an immediate advantage tactically for strikes, especially while you're in close and as a group attack or a swarm attack.
Yeah, so with a ship like that, you can throw lots of extra dice and have room to increase the effectiveness at the same time. So you're not just throwing blind dice, you're throwing quality dice.
Exactly. You're bettering your chances while you're throwing your dice. And it only costs you 22.
Yeah, that's the main reason why the Burrell class can be very appealing is, yeah, they're not quite as durable, but Klingons are very aggressive and very prone to the joust attacks, where they fly in, they pound, hope to turn you into dust before you get the chance to fire back. And with a ship like this, you really have the ability to pull that off.
Exactly.
You've got Borg-level power out of this guy.
Oh,
throwing 6 dice.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing damage.
So, David, shall you cap us off before the contributors and share with us your number one pick?
Well, my number one is the Klingon ship that started it all, and that is the generic Vorcha.
Baby.
As Brendan put it, as his number 3. It's tough to beat 5 attack dice.
Really is.
And it's tough to beat the efficiency when it comes to points that the Vorcha offers.
Mm-hmm. The nice thing about the Vorcha, whether you're going named or generic, is if you're cloaked, your shields don't really matter anyway. So you're putting yourself in the same class as the Prometheus or the Enterprise E. You've got the same attack power. You've got the same hull, but you've actually got a lot more defense dice. So you've got the better chance of avoiding damage, and you can deal just as much damage. And on top of that, if you're in close, which is where you want to be with these guys, your enemy throws 1 less attack die.
I think the important thing to remember about Klingons is they're very vital when they work as a group and when they're in close. I mean, you have the Borg, or even
8472.
Yeah, 8472, and they work very well on their own. But if you're using the Klingons against, say, a stacked ship, an Intrepid class, it's like that's got everything, the whole bells and whistles
decked out.
Yeah, like completely decked out. That's a strong ship to fight on its own. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone up against, decked out Intrepids or, Romulan warbirds or, but if you have the strong core group and you can get in quick and get out quick and do a quick turnabout, while they're still trying to figure out what the heck's going on, they're just like, what the heck, right?
Well, with the Klingon swarms, you can fly in quick, pound away, fly out, come about for another run.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's tons of maneuverability with the Klingons. There's tons of get in there, hit hard, hope you survive long enough to turn about and do it all over again. So it really is just a fun ship, and for 26 points, what's not to like?
Indeed.
And it looks super cool.
It does look very cool. It is one of the best looking models they did, and it holds up even today, 2 years later.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that it's not a ship that you should just sort of like forget about, especially if you like your Klingons. Like, it's a good ship to have. I'd actually like to see more standalone Vorchas out there. I mean, there's so many other commanders that you can add to or that could come along with the Klingon groups, and just on its own, it's a cool ship. It's a big ship. It's a cool ship. People think it's an important part of the canon of Star Trek because they always see it in Star Trek.
Yeah, it's like the Katingas were the staple of the original series, and as we're going through the movie era, the Brels and then the Cavorts, that variety, the bird of prey for them was very prominent. And once we got into the heart of TNG, the Vorchas were essentially their flagships. And it wasn't until we got the Voudier, which was essentially what produced the Negvar from the out of canon concept. It wasn't until that we actually got anything more significant. So the Vorcha is kind of the heart of the Klingon Defense Force. And until we get more, we're limited to what was in the starter. So I'm really looking forward to the possibility of WizKids giving us another Vorcha. We've got the Kamchi, the Bortas, and so many more just in the TNG canon. So here's hoping.
Yeah, I mean it gives the Klingons another take at revamping their classes of ships and that. You can really do a lot just with the Negvar and the Vorchas. Like if they came out with more of the Vorchas, like people would buy them. People are always talking about Vorchas and how you get the primary Vorcha from the starter kit and that's it. More Vorchas.
Bottom line, the Vorcha is a highly sought after ship that we want to see more of. Okay, David, what's next?
We're going to toss it to our contributors and see what they have to say about Klingons.
Hi, this is Steven Vandeventer again, manager of Da Vinci's DreamWorks 2, Jensen Beach, Florida. I'm going to talk to you about my favorite Klingon ship. I'm going to say my favorite Klingon ship just to play around with is Chang's Bird of Prey. I'm a big fan of Undiscovered Country. I like the wings up model. I like the coloration. Chang was a really cool captain, and he works really well in the Ningtao. I love doing that. But I like that it could fire torpedoes while cloaked. And the mission that it came with was awesome. We've played that mission a few times. I have a player that loves to play just Excelsior, so we've played back and forth a few times, both as the Klingon player and as the Federation player. I just like the ship. I like the way it looks. I like the theme that it brought, and its mission was great. It was just very fun. It's like, I can't wait to hear what everybody else picked. Night, guys.
Innkeeper here from the Wandering Inn, picking my favorite Klingon ship, or at least top Klingon ship in my opinion. Whenever I build a list, I'm always taking the Cavort class, specifically the IKS Koraga. 4 attack, 1 dodge, 5 hull, 3 shields. It definitely boosts a bit higher than most Klingon ships, but definitely not the highest in the stat line. So why bother with this? it seems to have 1 attack less, as well as 1 hull less than some of the bigger ships. And the reasoning here is rear firing arc on the Cavort really helps it out. It's agile enough, it can run in, shoot, run off, and fire torpedoes as it's trying to get away. And the named ability that comes with the Coraga. Each time you defend while cloaked, roll +1 defense dice. So this ship is going to be getting 6 defense dice bare minimum, or 7 at range 3, which is pretty phenomenal. It can stay a bit more alive with an extra bit of dice, especially if you throw a dodge on there at long range. And you have 2 crew, 1 secondary weapon, and 1 tech slot. So it definitely can have quite the arsenal equipped to it. Give it a good captain, give it Kapla, Kunivas. So with that, you're going to be striking pretty hard despite the lack of an extra attack. Again, still 4 is pretty good for most Klingon vessels. And I always find myself taking the Cavort. It's generally very good on price, very good on maneuverability, and very good on the stat line. So that would be my top Klingon ship, is the IKS Coraga Cavort.
Hi everyone, it's Not Picard from the Faction Report. My favourite Klingon ship, it was a tough one, and it's a toss-up between 2, but eventually I decided to go for the Negvar. Negvar class ship has 6 hull and 2 shields on the generic, and I think that's a really good balance for a cloaking ship. It's also got a pretty good manoeuvring dial for a ship that's quite as big as it is. Great primary weapon value. It's just an all-around great ship that you can base some brilliant Klingon faction upgrades on. My second place one would be the Volatile, which has a slightly better manoeuvring dial, slightly less hit points than the Negvar has. I suppose the Negvar won out in the end because the Negvar has a greater survivability for a fleet of cloakers.
Hi, this is Dave Griffin. My favorite Klingon ship is the generic Vorcha class. You really don't need the extra shield when you're playing a cloaked Klingon. The Vorcha has a good stat line and enough durability to survive a hit or 2 while it's cloaked. I would say the honorable mention would probably be the Chitang, except that these days it's a little bit too easy to burn through the Klingon cloak, so the Vorcha definitely has my vote.
Hi, this is Chris from Tangerine Alert. My favourite Klingon ship from the game so far has to be the IKS Chitang. This was seen in DS9. It was General Martop's command ship. Worf worked as first officer briefly and was used in a number of raids. In the game itself, it became a staple for the first year pretty much. I used it a number of times. Lots of people, lots of power players used this ship for the first year pretty much. It was a 4 attack, so nothing amazing, but the ability to re-roll as many dice as you wanted to when cloaked was amazing. It was the OP2 prize for Dominion War, for those who are not aware, and I believe it is still the most expensive prize ship to buy, if you can find any sealed. So that's my choice, the IKS Chitang.
Hey everyone, it's Natasha from Dude, It's Just a Game. My favorite Klingon ship would have to be the generic Cavort class. I like this ship because it is, to me, the definition of a great ship to cloak. So it has 5 hull, which means that it's really nice when you're cloaked. Even if your opponent gets through your extra defense dice, they still have a ton of hull to go through. That makes it really hard to actually kill you in 1 turn. And then maybe you fly away or attack them back or something like that. It gives you some more time. And it's also extremely maneuverable. It has a come about, and it has some turns that are really helpful when trying maneuver. So those are the reasons I like the Cavort. Thanks for listening.
Well, Brendan, I want to say thank you for coming out and being a part of this wonderful podcast that we've put together. It's something that we're definitely proud of, and it's certainly a pleasure to have another perspective added.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me on the show.
I'd like to add, if there's people out there that would like to contribute their voice, by all means, contact us. We want to hear from you. If it's just an opinion you'd like to share with us behind the scenes, or something that you want to be aired, let us know what you have to say, because your voice matters.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're interested in coming on to co-host, we'll consider it, and we'll talk to you about it and work it out.
6.
So on that note,
5.
Until next time.
4.
This is Nick.
3.
And this is David.
2.
Ejecting the core.
Warp core ejected.
Warp Core Breach is produced by Nick Norris and David Montgomery, with additional content from our contributors. Our computer is voiced by Corinne Donnelly.
Warp Core Breach is not endorsed, sponsored, or affiliated with CBS Studios Incorporated or the Star Trek franchise. All Star Trek trademarks and logos are owned by CBS Studios Incorporated.
All sound files are used under Creative Commons 3.0 by attribution. For specifics, please visit our Facebook page by searching Warp Core Breach Podcast. If you want to contribute to the show, let us know on the Facebook page, or you can email us at warpcorebreachpodcast@gmail.com.
To the last, I will grapple with thee.
Why does he always do that? I don't get it.
Your arm's off. No, it isn't. It's merely a flesh wound.
Come back here, I'll bite you to death.
I shall taunt you a second time. Okay, how Star Trek Attack Wing turned into Monty Python and the Holy Grail, we'll never know.